From censored files to clear evidence, this is Redacted Realms.
The hospital room's sterile scent was suddenly overpowered by the metallic tang of ozone. On the bedside monitor, the flatline continued its relentless beep. But the man's chest began to rise and fall. No machine pumped his lungs. No doctor stood nearby. A low, wet rasp echoed in the silence. Not from his mouth, but from the walls themselves. The air grew thick and damp, clinging to the skin like a cold, living film. He was dead to the world, yet something else had taken over the most basic function of life. For 3 months, this man didn't breathe. His body found another way. And what woke up after those 90 days was no longer entirely human. His lungs failed, their final breaths escaping in ragged gasps. His brain was damaged, neural pathways fraying like snapped wires. Doctors declared survival impossible, their voices hollow with clinical certainty. Yet he persisted, a flicker of consciousness clinging in the void. Because, according to his medical team, he started to breathe through his skin. The backstory: an establishing shot of a quiet, sun-baked suburban street in Austin, Texas, the air thick with the scent of cut grass and distant barbecue. This is Michael Ross, a 42-year-old architect from Austin, Texas. A father of 2, a weekend cyclist, Michael was the family's anchor. Steady, dependable, the man who fixed everything. But last October, that anchor gave way. It began with what felt like a brutal flu, a deep, rattling cough that wouldn't relent. The fever brought with it a strange metallic scent in the air and a damp chill that clung to the skin no matter how many blankets he used. Then came a cough that refused to relent. Within 2 days, Michael lay in the ICU at St. David's, his body besieged by a brutal diagnosis: acute respiratory distress syndrome paired with a rare, aggressive bacterial pneumonia. The air in his room carried the sterile, metallic scent of antiseptic and fear. His lungs were, in essence, petrifying, turning to stone within his own chest. Doctors induced a coma, letting his body wage its silent war. The machine's rhythmic hiss became the only sound in that sterile room. For 14 days, Sarah kept vigil in the antiseptic-scented gloom. Each tick of the clock measured the agonizing stretch of the unknown. Then came the unthinkable. A colossal power surge struck the hospital's ICU wing. Backup systems whirred to life. But Michael's ventilator suffered a critical 7-minute failure. The ventilator's alarm blared once, then cut to an absolute, oppressive silence. Muted chaos unfolded beyond the glass as the clock ticked on. 7 minutes without oxygen. For a brain already under assault, this was the final blow. Once stabilized, the EEG traced only the faintest flicker of thought against a flat, silent horizon. Michael had slipped from an induced coma into a deep, permanent vegetative state. His lungs were now scarred husks, unable to process oxygen even with the ventilator pushed to its limit. In a sterile, quiet room, the prognosis was delivered to Sarah. There was no viable path forward. They advised beginning end-of-life discussions. But then, Drive, Aris Thorne, the lead intensivist, stared at the monitors in disbelief. Michael's blood oxygen levels, which should have collapsed, were holding steady. Not at normal levels, but just enough to sustain his most basic functions. It was as if some phantom breath was keeping him alive, where no breath could possibly reach. Tests were repeated, scans meticulously examined. His lung function had collapsed to near zero, yet the monitors whispered an impossible truth. Oxygen saturated his bloodstream. Carbon dioxide was being expelled, a silent exhalation with no breath to carry it. The air in the room grew thick with the sterile scent of ozone and a deeper, metallic hint of iron. Only Michael's integumentary system remained, his skin. The team hypothesized his body, in a desperate survival gambit, had activated a dormant, atavistic reflex. His pores dilated grotesquely, the capillary network just beneath hyperstimulated, attempting a crude form of cutaneous respiration. It was a process seen in amphibians, not adult humans. The air in the room grew thick with the metallic tang of ozone and the faint, sickly scent of biological decay. A primal dread took hold of the observers. They were witnessing a body rewriting its own fundamental rules of survival. Thorne's voice, captured in that recorded interview, still carries a tone of profound bewilderment. He described it as inefficient, barely enough to matter, yet undeniably present. The air carried a metallic tang, like old blood, as they observed. What they witnessed, he said, was nature's desperate, final gamble, a biological Hail Mary pass. His body was trying to turn itself into a lung. Michael became a living paradox, a medical ghost. The air in his room grew thick with the scent of ozone and sterile decay. He was the skin breather of St. David's, a testament to something medicine could not name. He hovered in a twilight between existence and oblivion, kept alive by a process so archaic it mocked modern science. For Sarah, hope had curdled into exquisite torment. Her husband was both present and absent, his body warm, his heart beating a steady, hollow rhythm against her palm. But his mind had fled to some distant, unreachable elsewhere. She spoke to him daily, her words clinging to the sterile air. She played his favorite Bruce Springsteen records, the vinyl crackle echoing in the quiet room. She brought the children in to hold his hand, their small, warm fingers brushing against his cold, unresponsive skin. But his hands never moved. They just lay there, a silent testament to the void he'd fallen into. 8 long weeks of watching, hoping, praying, and then, impossibly, she saw it. A single finger twitched, not a random spasm or a trick of the light. It was a deliberate, agonizingly slow drag of skin against her own waiting palm. Activity flickered back on the brain scans, infinitesimally slow. The cutaneous breathing was so inefficient it drastically slowed his metabolism. His body entered a near-hibernative state. The air in the room grew heavy with the scent of ozone and sterile decay. Ironically, this metabolic slowdown may have reduced the brain's oxygen demand, preventing catastrophic damage and initiating a glacial healing process. But what was the terrible price? What becomes of a consciousness trapped in that oxygen-starved, silent limbo for 3 endless months? His reality dissolved into fractured impressions, the chemical sting of antiseptic, the cold press of starched sheets, and voices, muffled, distant, sometimes played backwards, that scratched at the edges of his awareness. When Michael finally clawed his way back and opened his eyes, his mind was a prison of silent, screaming thoughts. Paralyzed, his first reaction was a flood of tears he couldn't control. Later, he'd try to explain it to Sarah, his voice thick with a dread that clung to his throat. He insisted it wasn't a dream, the memory sharp as the scent of ozone and damp earth that had filled the room. It was a waking terror, a reality that left his skin crawling and the air thick with the silence of something watching. It wasn't darkness he felt, but a suffocating drowning in the air itself. Every molecule of oxygen seeping through his skin became a sharp, painful awareness. His own biological struggle screamed through a hyperconsciousness that left no room for thought. He was trapped, a prisoner inside a body that had become its own failing life support. Michael Ross is finally home. He sits by the window, his body a map of medical procedures. Tracheotomy scars like pale rivers across his skin. Each breath is a conscious effort, his lungs carrying the memory of what happened. He's learning to walk again, to use his hands, rebuilding what was taken from him. Physically, his recovery was miraculous, but the psychological abnormality remained. He developed a profound, paralyzing phobia of closed, still air. The stagnant atmosphere would trigger an instant, visceral panic. Any space without strong, constant ventilation became a chamber of primal dread. Michael sleeps with a powerful fan on year-round, needing the constant atmospheric movement against his skin. His doctors published his case, calling it cutaneous respiration as a compensatory mechanism in total lung failure, a sterile title for a living nightmare. Michael doesn't see a miracle. The fan's hum is the only thing separating him from suffocation's silent embrace. Every breath not taken by his lungs is a stolen moment, paid for by the constant whisper of air across his flesh. He witnessed a threshold violated, his own form betraying a hidden, desperate power. A revelation that cost him his last shred of peace. The damp, metallic scent of ozone clung to the air, a cold, sticky residue coating his skin where the energy had manifested. From the shadows, a faint, wet, scratching sound began, syncopated with the ragged hitch of his own breath. Sarah. He saved his own life, but he had to become something else to do it. I got my husband back. But sometimes I look at him, and I wonder, what part of him did we leave in that room, breathing in the dark? The empty hospital room now holds only sterile sunlight and the low, mechanical hum of the air vent. The bed is neat, the sheets crisp, but the air still carries the faint metallic scent of antiseptic and something older, something stagnant. So we are left with a haunting question, echoing in that quiet space, where something unseen still seems to draw breath. Did Michael Ross survive due to an unprecedented medical anomaly? Or did he stumble upon something primordial? A survival switch buried deep in our shared genetic blueprint. A switch we all possess, but can never afford to trigger. What does it mean to be human when your biology can rewrite its own rules? This grotesque miracle saved his life. But at what cost to his humanity? But what did it cost to become the man who breathes through his skin? The ambient hum of the facility faded into absolute quiet. A thick, chemical odor of ozone and antiseptic clung to the damp air. Then, the only sound was the faint, wet rasp of his own new lungs.
If this file opened your eyes, subscribe and open the next case.